hundreds of them, millions of them. Symbol of prosperity. A few years back, in the 50s, do you remember, suddenly every family seemed to have a car, except, of course, the Joneses. The Joneses already had two. At that time, the rising flood of cars from the factories seemed to symbolize the growth of Britain's economy. The tide of affluence was flowing in the kitchen, too. Mrs. Jones and many of her neighbors already had a fridge and a washing machine. And now the man was bringing Mrs. Jones one of those newfangled spin dryers. But the real point was, whether you bought a washing machine or a car, you were buying sheets of steel. So really, steel sheet production was a truer guide to Britain's growth. And here was the trouble. By the mid-50s, the British steel industry was already working to capacity. To keep pace with the growing demand, some steel had to be imported. Between 1952 and 1955, imports of steel sheet multiplied nearly 6 times. But this was economic madness. For us, an industrial nation, to import a semi-finished product that we could very well make ourselves, if only we had more plant. This was a challenge someone had to meet.
That someone was us, the firm of Richard Thomas and Baldwins. At our works at Evervale, we were already making a not inconsiderable contribution towards the nation's needs. Now it was decided, with the approval of the government, that we should build a new plant incorporating the most advanced methods to produce another 1.5 million tons of steel a year. Then came the question, where was the new works to be sited? The location could greatly affect our cost of production. Our customers are mainly in the Midlands and the London area. We needed to be reasonably near them. Then we have customers overseas too. So we needed to be near a port for the export of our products and also for the import of high-grade ores from abroad. We also needed easy access to our established sources of raw materials in Britain, coking coal and limestone from the hills and valleys of South Wales. Our works at Evervale was having to buy in steel slabs so as to meet its orders for steel sheet. Here was an opportunity for coordination if the new works were sited close to Evervale and its rail link with Newport. Within this area, other needs narrowed the field. The need for vast supplies of water, good rail communications, and a level tract of land. It had to be large enough not only for the works, but also for future expansion. Out of the whole country, the place that best conformed to the economic and geographical requirements of the project was a flat stretch of meadowland in the county of Monmouthshire, east of Newport, in the country parish of Llanwern.
Bringing a dirty great steelworks to a country district like ours wasn't going to be all plain sailing. Did they think they could just charge their way through regardless of the people who belong here? What were they going to do to the countryside? Put a bulldozer through the lot? If they interfered with our ditch system, the whole area would become one big bog. Look at the roads, high and dry above the fields. Why? Well, to keep a way open to the sea wall. Don't forget this is land reclaimed from the sea.
Yes, we did have a nasty flood once. The sea broke through and drowned 2,000 people, they say. You can see the high water marks on the churches to this day. Now, we don't want the same thing to happen again, do we? Oh, this has always been a peaceful place. Fresh air, fresh water. What they want to go and spoil it for? What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. W.H. Davis wrote that. He came from around here. Ah, the good old ways, you know, the country ways like. They die hard with us. My grandparents are lying here, and their parents too. Nowadays there's more people in the churchyard and perhaps fewer in the church. But there's no real change. We're still country people.
In Newport at County Hall, the project had been submitted by the company for planning consent. The planning subcommittee and its officers discussed the company's plans and grappled with all the problems the new works would present to the area. They were anxious how such a large plant could be assimilated into the countryside. They had to foresee its effects on the rural community. Being the county planning officer, I had to examine all the details submitted by the company of layout, design, elevations and landscaping. The project would have considerable effect on property rights and boundaries in the area. New common land would have to be provided by the company. Water supply would be another big problem. We'd have to guard against pollution of rivers and streams. And another headache would be communications. At the eastern end of the works, a new access road would certainly be needed and a greatly improved crossing of the railway. Thousands of men were coming to work on this spot, many of them family men. Were the nearby villages of Llanwern, Bishton and Langston to be turned into a steel town? Certainly not. The County Council decided that new housing estates should be added to establish communities within travelling distance of the new works. At Risca, Killeen, Llanmartin, Caldicot, Chepstow, and also at Cambran New Town. This meant new bus services to and from the works, though many workers would have their own cars. In County Hall, things sometimes seemed to be getting out of hand. Housing estates meant children, and they meant schools. The County Council had to do more building than the company.
In August 1959, the first of our men arrived on the site. One of the first jobs was to level up the ground. The original idea was to suck sand up from the estuary for this, but that could only be done at certain times of the year, and we couldn't keep to our schedule that way. So we brought shale from colliery tips all over South Wales. To do this, we hired lorries from private contractors all over the country.
The shale lorries, that's something we'll never forget. Rumble, rumble, rumble all day and all night.
We brought 9 million tons of shale from tips 50 miles around and improved a number of Welsh landscapes in the process. We laid down roads connecting all parts of the site with one another. The main watercourse, called the Monk's Ditch, crossed the site and had to be rerouted to fit in with the plan. 93,000 piles we drove to the hard rock 35 feet below. At one time, nearly every piling rig in the country was at work here. 3.5 miles long the site was. We got the foundations prepared and the buildings started to go up. North of the main site on Waltwood Hill, we dug out a new reservoir to store the water brought from the River Usk. The works would be drawing 14 million gallons of water from here every day. Water's vital when you're making steel.
And so are skilled men. The number of skilled men we should need when the works was finished was going to be hard to find. We started training apprentices in temporary workshops and classrooms. It was an exciting time for them to see the works they were going to man growing up around them. was in 1961 that we got the first equipment into commission. That was the tippler for the iron ore. Then, in the following year, the pieces of the jigsaw really began to fall into place. The result might have been an ugly conglomeration, but our architects had designed the entire works as a unified whole. We'd come a long way from the image of dark satanic mills that Blake stamped on industrial England.
Who's talking about England? Monmouthshire's in Wales, man.
The 26th of October 1962 was fixed for the official opening of the Spencer Works. Her Majesty the Queen had consented to perform the opening ceremony. For the occasion, we had part of the works transformed into a banqueting hall. Several hundred guests had luncheon and heard the Queen speak. After luncheon, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh went to the slabbing mill. For the opening ceremony, a steel ingot was brought from the soaking pit to the rolling table. The Queen pressed a button, and Spencer Works was in production.
By the time the works was in production, the population of my parish went up from 334 to several thousand. On most days of the week, and sometimes at night too, I go into the works to meet and talk with the men. Most of them live outside my area, but some of them do live in the old parish, and it's very pleasant not only to see them in church, but also taking part in the affairs of the parish generally.
Oh, yes, the steel chops have settled in here well enough. Mind you, when they join us in praising the Lord, we sometimes wonder whether we're all thinking of the same wondrous works. Down at the pub, things have changed since the works came. They built on a smart new bar and a terrace. Very up-to-date it is. Aye, things are changing everywhere. With all the extra cars and lorries on the road, new filling stations and garages have sprung up. There's a difference in the traffic nowadays. In Newport, the corporation's built a new road bridge over the river. Hold-ups on the old one was something dreadful before that. Sometimes of the day it took you an hour to drive into town. Everybody felt some difference. It was good for some, of course, and bad for others. If you were buying a house, well, you'd left it too late. The prices in Newport went up £500 all round. Shops and offices too. It was the demand. Wages went up too all round here. There's no doubt. There were more men earning more money and more women spending it.
Men came to work at Llanwern from all over Britain. Many from other steelworks, quite a lot from other industries. Some settled down better than others. A lot depended on how their wives settled into the new houses built for them. And a lot of that depended on how happy their children were in their new schools. The opening of the works meant a fresh start in life for a lot of people.
Well, you don't want a lecture, do you, on how to make steel? Every schoolboy seems to know that nowadays. At Spencer Works, we follow the same sequence of operations as other people. Only we think our methods are a bit better. For instance, we don't usually put raw iron ore into the blast furnaces. We sinter the ore, fuse it with coke, to make it easier to extract the iron. Our sinter plant is the largest in Britain, and the whole plant is controlled automatically. The mixture, the fuel, the water, and the flow of materials. Then the blast furnaces.
They're the first in the country to be charged entirely by automatic controls. A fall in the level of the material in the furnace sets off the charging process. Hopper to conveyor, conveyor to skips, skips to furnace. It's all automatic. At the steelmaking plant, we use only the most modern process, LD converters, 3 of them. Each one produces 100 tons of molten steel every 45 minutes.
And a lot of fumes and dust into the bargain. The first year you were here, there was that red iron oxide dust over everything. I've heard of oxide daisies. I was getting oxide dahlias.
Well, I'll admit we've had our teething troubles. And a breakdown means either letting the dust get out until the fault's repaired or closing down the plant. And nobody wants that. I can't promise we'll never have any more breakdowns, but we'll do our best. And you know, we are the first steelworks to be built since the passing of the Clean Air Act. So we're pretty conscious of our responsibilities in that line. Our coke oven chimney has been built 250 feet high so that the smoke will be dispersed well above ground level. Our surplus coke oven gas is ignited and burnt. Sinter plant dust is prevented by electrostatic precipitators from escaping to the air. Even the slag we make is not piled in unsightly heaps. It is processed on the plant and made into material for surfacing roads.
Ah, yes, but what about those piles of coal and iron ore and what's all lying around? In Clanburn, every time there's a sea breeze, we know what'll happen. We'll get the dust over everything.
Well admitted, the stockpiles are a problem after a spell of dry weather, and frankly, there's really very little we can do about it, though we're planning to try the effect of a screen of poplar trees. The people that get it worst, of course, are those in the road nearest the works. Some householders there wanted to move when we came, so we offered to buy their properties at a fair valuation, and then we let them to our own officials. If they find that their families are noticing any dust or fumes about, you can be sure they're the first to get on my tail.
Under the Clean Air Act, the local authorities have a duty to guard against air pollution. As soon as the building of the works began, we set up a number of atmospheric testing stations in the neighborhood, so that the difference the works would make could be measured. Before work began on the site, the dust content of the air was, of course, very small, except in one place it's only 1/5 higher now.
At Spencer Works, making ingot steel is only the beginning. Steel sheet is what we make, and the hot mill where it's rolled from slab is the centerpiece of the works. A damn big centerpiece, too, nearly half a mile long from the soaking pits at one end to the coiler at the other. And the sequence of processes here is almost fully automated. A number of sensing devices throughout the mill feed information to the mill's own online computer, which controls every stage of the steel's progress from slab to coil. A computer reacts quicker and more accurately than a man, however skilled he is. That is why our computer-controlled hot mill is turning out steel coils of consistently higher quality than we've ever been able to achieve before. The hot mill computer gets its operating instructions from the computer center. The computers here are mainly concerned with processing information. Customers' orders, for instance, come in here, are put out as punched tape, and fed into the scheduling computer. It is this computer that gives the hot mill computer its production program. Another computer here correlates and issues control information to various points in the plant. And another is used for research and to analyze operations for quality control. We can't say yet that the whole works is automated, but we've gone a long way in that direction, and we're still moving.
From the golf course, you look down over the works to the sea in the distance. We've seen a little what the coming of the works has meant to our neighbors here. But what about the wider effects? What about that challenge we had to meet? In the coal mill at this moment, you can see the strip being put through its final processes. It's pickled to clean off the scale, coaled reduced to the specified gauge, annealed and tempered to the finish required, coiled or cut up into sheets. A consistent high-quality product, as good as the care of skilled men in a highly automated plant can make it. The finished products of the coal mill, plus the heavy gauge sheets and plates that come from the hot finishing plant, amount to nearly 750,000 tons of steel sheet a year. for British industry and for export. And the point is, this is 750,000 tons that Britain couldn't produce before the Spencer Works was built. Instead of our economy being held up in a steel bottleneck or dependent on imports from abroad, now we can feel confident of meeting our own requirements and of exporting steel sheet too. And with all the land alongside earmarked for extending the works, we can keep pace with any expansion of demand for many years to come. Britain's economy is always being threatened, it seems, in one way or another. Here, at least, one threat has been boldly and effectively dealt with. Not that we can sit back. In this business of making steel, you've always got to be looking and moving ahead. But already it's clear we've a job here we can all take some pride in. We've built a great, intricate machine, and with effort and skill, we've made it tick.
I've been here right from the beginning. Funny how it gets you. First you're feeling your way all the time. Then after a bit it becomes something you take in your stride. All in a day's work. A year or two ago it was a new job and a new house, new prospects in a strange place. Now, well, we've settled down. Just like the works. Our home's here and our future's here at Llanwern. We've almost forgotten what life was like before the works was built.
Indeed, that's true. Even to us who've always lived here. Or it soon will be.